talk about the HSC Chemistry Trial and Prelim Blueprint. We'll talk about pretty much everything you need to know before you go into this critical period ahead of your trials or prelim, what you should be doing these holidays, and the ways in which you should be doing it with your study. So at the end of all this, I'll give you a week by week breakdown of what you need to be doing, and that's all in the slides. The parts before that, I'll be talking about how you need to think about this holiday in terms of how you frame your study, in terms of how you actually do your study, and how to get the most out of your exam on the day. So we'll talk about a lot about how you become exam ready, which is a crucial part of this process before your trials and prelims, which a lot of students fall short on. You may study a lot, but if you're not studying the right ways, you're not going to get the marks in the exam, and that's ultimately what it's about. So just to introduce myself first. My name's Jeff. I graduated a few years ago now, and I've been teaching HSC Chem for about 5 years. My marks are up on the board, and I'm currently a UNSW med student and run Catalyst Chemistry. So that's a little bit about me before we get going. Before we start, I just wanted to paint the bigger picture of where you guys all are in the year at the moment, because it can be a little bit difficult to actually frame where you are, and you're really all just in the thick of it at the moment. You're going into this trial and prelim period. You've done a few assessments this year. For the year 12s, you've done 3 of your assessments. For the year 11s, you've done 2, and you're about to get into the hairy end of both of your years. The prelim is the biggest exam for year 11. The trials and the HSC are the biggest exams for year 12s. And you're not just doing chem. I'm very well aware of that. You're running 4 different marathons at least at the same time, unless you accelerated a bunch of subjects. And it's going to get very busy very quickly. So you have to be able to manage your time very, very efficiently in order to do well in this year. So as I said, for the year 11s, you've done assessment tasks 1 and 2, and that just leaves the prelim. For most schools, this prelim exam is weighted more than assessment tasks 1 and 2. So it's critical that you really get it right. And then for year 12s, you've done your 3 internal assessments, which make up about, give or take, 30 to 35% of your overall 100% mark. So the biggest part of your mark is still to come in the rest of the year. You've got your trial, you've got your HSC, and ultimately that contributes to your grade in the HSC, because you get your internal mark, which is based on your internal assessments and your trials. This is rank based, and it's based on sort of the standard distribution that you get across your school. And then the examination mark is what you score in the HSC ultimately. So be well aware that you've still got up to 70% of your marks left to gain if you're year 12, and that's most of you here. If you're year 11, you've got about 40 to 50% probably to gain. But the whole idea that I want to paint is that this term 3, and a little bit beyond for the year 12s, this is the majority of your work. This is where you should really be working the hardest, because the marks that you get in these exams are worth just more compared to what's come before. So you're probably feeling somewhere in here at the moment where you're either feeling pretty confident or you're feeling pretty lost with it all. This is natural for any learning process. This is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. I think it's really important you understand that even if you feel confident, you may not be at a point of exam readiness and, I guess, capability to crush the HSC for your exams. So you have to work your way through this whole period of feeling pretty lost with the subject, because chem can feel that way a lot of the time, before you start feeling better and pretty much on top of it all. Okay, and it's the process of becoming exam ready, which I want to focus on a lot more today. You've done a lot of awareness and understanding building through the year, learning content, attempting some questions, but this is really now the stage where you have to be good at taking exams, and it's a totally different skill to just covering content and learning it. Okay, so to do that, you have to decide exactly how you're going to sort of shape the next 10 to 18 weeks to maximize your chance of success, and you have to sacrifice a few things along the way. So it's not going to be perfect, and I'm very well aware of that. Whether that means you're sacrificing some time with friends, a little bit of time with your sleep, you somehow have to juggle it all and make it work. So the problem is that you really are quite time poor for the next 10 to 18 weeks. So there should be an easier way to go about crushing HC Chem specifically. And as most of you already know here as Catalyst students, it's Catalyst Chemistry. So basically we run our terms 3 weeks ahead of class pace. And for this next term, term three, the trial intensive is what's about to start. So I just want to explain that to you guys so that you know what's coming. For the year 12s, we'll finish mod 8 all by week 1 of holiday. So that means when you start your term, you would have already finished mod 8. And in this week here, we sit the Catalyst trial exam as well. So full scale mock trial exam, 3 hours, front to back. And you go through that with us in week 2. And then from there, we're just refining using exam skills, exam-based questions. And that should put you in good stead for your trial, which comes around week 4 to 6 in the school term. Usually some schools run earlier, week 3 or even week 2. So if that's you and you're running it a little bit earlier, do let us know because we can give you the trial a little bit early, and that way you don't miss out on that learning from the trial. For the year 11s, we'll be covering the rest of mod 3. So in the holidays, we have the rest of mod 3. We finish mod 4 by week 3. So that's a three-week module. We do it pretty quick. And the mock prelim is in week 4 and 5. And same for you guys, if you have an earlier prelim and you know that it's going to be before week 5, then you can take the prelim earlier and we can get that sorted for you as well. So that's pretty much the structure of the term. The way it works is you learn your content really quick ahead of your class, and you just have more volume of questions by the time of your exam. And that's why our students tend to score better marks. You should be learning from the best if you want to be the best, which is why our tutors, we think, are the best. We've got the marks to go for it. We've done this before. We know what we're talking about, so you can trust us. And you want the best resources possible. So our students tend to find our resources are quite comprehensive. So if it's something you're looking for this term to start tutoring for those who haven't joined Catalyst yet, in our opinion, it's the place to be. So we have the biggest part of the term left. If you want to make that impact on the remainder of your chem prelim or trial year, then consider it. Our classes start from next week. So if you're keen to enroll, sign up through the link on our website. But otherwise, are there any questions about the way the term is set up, first of all? And any questions about how Catalyst works? Okay, cool. So as I said, enrollments close next week, July 2nd. So don't miss out if you are thinking about it. But for the bulk of today, I wanted to talk about how to become exam ready. If you have any questions at any point, just jump in, unmute, or type it in the chat, and I'll respond as quick as I can, but I'll also check for you for questions along the way as well. So we'll talk about first how to become exam ready. Basically, I have an equation that I use to think about how you increase your exam readiness and what you need to do it. And through that equation, we'll learn the different things you should be doing this holidays. And at the end of this session, I'll give you the blueprint of what you're doing week by week. So let's get into it. In case you didn't already know, the syllabus, which is this green booklet, you can just search for it online if you haven't already. Most of you probably have it already, so I won't spend too long explaining this. You should know that it is completely finite. There is a finite list of dot points that you need to know. And just going through the syllabus dot point by dot point is probably the first thing you should be doing these holidays. Figuring out what you do know, what you know very well, or what you don't know is going to be your first way in to start addressing what you probably aren't as comfortable with. So go through the syllabus, stop light, basically label green, orange, or red what you are and aren't confident with, and that way you can address what you're not confident with first as a priority, and then work from there. So work through the syllabus, make sure you're conscious of it. At this point of the year, for most modules, you've already learnt most of the content, probably all of the content, in fact. So mod 1 to 2 for year 11, mod 5 to 7 for year 12. You're probably around this stage where there's not really much point doing more coverage. The yellow line is your content coverage, doing content sessions, going over notes for the first time. You're probably going to be using less of those techniques getting towards these exams, and instead you're starting to lean more on active recall. You should all know roughly what active recall is. It's just anything that gets you to recall information from the depths of your depths of your brain and actually bring it out rather than just reading off a page or highlighting something passively. And most students will fail to increase their active recall ahead of their exams by enough. So what do you do for active recall? You're doing anything in these boxes. There's obviously more ways to do this, but you can quiz yourself, flashcards, practice past exams, past questions, teaching the material to others, writing from memory, or blurting. These are things you should now be doing a bit more of. And then content awareness strategies when you're learning something for the first time. You're going to still use this for mod 8 and then for the year 11s, mod 3 and 4 as you're learning them, but you should be quickly trying to transition over to active recall as much as possible to get yourself actually exam ready. Okay, cool. So before I jump into this, does that all make sense for everyone? Any questions? All right. So this is by no means backed by science, but this is backed by my understanding of learning and how I've seen students learn or failed to perform in exams over the last 5 years. There's four things that you need to optimize to become exam ready, and they're all captured in this equation here. So M is the marks that you get from past papers that you attempt, whether that's from our homework booklets, whether it's from school homework, whether it's from past exams, it doesn't really matter, or HSC exams as well. The more marks you've completed and attained from these papers, the better you'll do. The second variable is C, which is the marks you've corrected from going through and actively reviewing your past questions as well. In my head, I weight these as 3 times as valuable as marks that you just get from doing a paper the first time. So reviewing and correcting mistakes. T is your time pressure tolerance. So you have to be confident doing chem questions under time. And students who don't do timed exams early enough are going to fall short in the trial, where you have to manage your time well. It's a 3-hour exam, and yes, you have about 1.8 minutes per mark, but the moment you hit 1 or 2 or even 3 difficult questions, your timing all falls out the window. And the last variable is H, which is just the hours of sleep the night before your exam. So you need at least 7. It's no secret that you need good sleep, but I'll give you a few strategies to walk through getting good sleep if you are struggling with that too. So 4 variables, and I'll talk through each of them. The first one, M, marks you attain from your past papers. The papers you need to be doing as a priority for year 12 are actual HSC exams. Too often, what I see students doing is they save the exams for later, but there's really no need to save papers at this, I guess, stage of the syllabus. There's 6 years of HSC exams, so you have to be doing what you're actually going to get your paper written based off these holidays. So I recommend that you do 2 of the easier papers and 1 of the hard papers as a very bare minimum before you sit your trial. And I think I recommend 2023, 2024, and 2020 a little bit later on. You can do obviously whatever you prefer, but I think those 3 papers are great before a trial exam. 2021 and 2022 are much harder papers in my opinion. And if you're pushing for a higher band 6, you want the harder questions, do those. But I would recommend knocking the easy ones out of the way these holidays so you know what the baseline is and so you can see also a little bit of the harder end. Do your own school's papers. This goes without saying that your school teachers are probably going to write the same style of paper year on year. So if you've seen their papers before from the previous years, you're more likely to know what's coming in your exam. If you don't, then you're going in blind and it's not advisable. So I would say at least do the last 2 years before you get started on other schools' papers. One up from other schools' papers, I would recommend the Catalyst papers. So we write these papers based off of all the other trials that we've seen. So it's an aggregation of what we think is most accurate to the past year's HSC from all the papers that we go through. So that's all of the James Roos, selective school papers, grammar, Barker, Abbottsley, all the papers. We take the questions we think are best and we put them all together so it saves you guys a bit of time having to go through and source them yourself. And then lastly, pick the top school papers. Don't just pick any papers. these schools have students who perform the best. Reason why is their questions match up to the HSC the closest. So my personal favorites are Rus and grammar, but any selective school paper, and then the top performing private school papers as well. These are great. Obviously, also the independent paper, CSSA, if you can get your hands on those, they're good papers as well. Okay, any questions on papers? And I should say for the year 11s, obviously the HSC isn't anything to think about, so just ignore that. But do your own school's papers first as your priority. Okay, cool. So now that we know what to be doing to get those marks, you need to do as many marks as possible. So in order to get that volume, you have to be smart about your study. Um, And basically, you need to outwork your cohort in order to get more volume of marks out while studying either the same or even less. So the way you do it that I suggest, and it has helped my students immeasurably through the last few years, is a method called time blocking. So I still do it today. It's the only way that you can be maximally productive with your time. Essentially, what it does is it takes everything you need to do, puts it into a list. So as you can see on the screen, the first thing you do with time blocking is you write out everything you need to do in just task format. What you'll do from that is then you assign time, a block of time to complete each task. So for example, to complete the Catalyst mock exam takes 3 hours. If you were to do corrections from a topic test, it might take 30 minutes, but just make sure you make an estimate that is realistic for how long each task should take. Because what this is doing is it is setting in your head actually how long something should take so you can plan your day to cover as much ground as possible. If you have 6 hours to work with for your study, for example, I'm not saying you have to study 6 hours straight away, but if you had 6 hours to work with, it means you can get, for example, a 3 hour paper done, 30 minutes of corrections, and then let's say you want to do something else from another subject, you want to do a maths past paper as well, and that's going to take you, let's say, 3 hours too. Let's say you have 6.5 hours. That would all be feasible within 6.5 hours, which is blocked out very nicely for you. It prevents you from stretching out your tasks to longer than they should take. So you're actually it makes you a bit more accountable to how long you should be spending on each thing and not wasting time just studying chem. Because I think that's a big mistake that students will make, just writing chem as what you're studying or writing maths without saying what chem you're studying or what maths you're studying very specifically. So they're the first two things. So then once you have the tasks and the time, you can then make out your study days, plan it out from the moment you wake up, be quite granular with it, and you can basically just allot time to complete each specific task. And you can put in time to do other things like go hang out with mates or chill out. It's important you also do take rest during this period too to not burn out. I think that's a very important thing to also factor into your schedule so you don't feel guilty for stepping away from your study. But being able to block out time effectively and stick to a schedule is the way that you guarantee you cover exactly how much you need to cover over this period. Okay, cool. So then the question is, how many hours a day is enough? I'll give different answers for year 11, year 12, but could I get some suggestions either unmute or just in the chat? How many hours of study per day is enough to do well in HSC? Let's say benchmark to get a band 6. How much is enough? Comment in the chat. How many hours of study do we think is enough? Okay. And I think I'm referring to study across all your subjects when I ask this question, just to be clear. Okay, cool. So we've got a fair few sessions, I think ranging from 3 to 6. I'll be honest with where I was at through these years, so it's more realistic. I think for year 11, getting into the prelim period, you've probably not studied too extensively up until this point, and that's very fair. The year doesn't really count for year 12 at all, and I think it's just a good dry run for testing yourself and how much you can do. So I think going into this holiday period, aim for at least three-ish per day. Obviously, it doesn't have to be every day, but three is a good benchmark to start at. And try days where you work a bit longer, see how you tolerate 5+ hours on a day. I think at the busiest in the holidays, you would try to do at least a few big days where you may do 7, 8, just to see how it goes. But it's important that you have balance as well. So year 11, start to step up towards studying longer hours on a day. And then year 12, for you guys, the holiday period, find a way to make it digestible. But if you're really aiming for a band six, to dedicate enough time across 4 to 5 subjects, and you don't have to do 4 to 5 subjects a day, but to dedicate enough across a week, I would say you should be aiming for anywhere from 5 to 8 hours per day. Um, and I'm just speaking from experience. I know what students in the past have done to get band sixes, because if that's what you're aiming for, that's where you need to be. And if you're not there, the sad truth is there are students in the state who are working that hard, and they have been working this hard already from this year, from this, like earlier this year. But this is the time to really ramp it up if you're looking to push yourself. And I would say that's a range that is somewhat achievable and not too far to the point where it's not sustainable. I think anything 8+ is where you start to get drop off in returns. So I wouldn't go past 8. I'd keep it around there. Does that make sense for everyone? Okay. And I've just put up a graphic as well, just to note that it's not all about the number of hours you do in a day. It's also about the quality of those hours. So if you're doing super high quality, where you do day off, day on, day off, day on, day off, sort of half day, that is fine. If you're doing, if you're going hard every single day, this is fine too, but just know that you're probably going to have a period where you drop off. Afterwards, any form of consistency is really what you're looking for, and you have to find that number for yourself. What feels good, what feels sustainable. It's going to vary from person to person, but as a general figure, um, those are the numbers I would recommend. Okay. Some extra notes around planning. You can take a screenshot of this. I won't go through all of it. So there's a few rules that I use to help make my day more efficient. That's how I help. That's basically how I can balance med with teaching you guys and living a life outside of all this as well. But if you have any questions on planning, I'm happy to chat at the end as well. Okay, cool. So that's first variable done. M, that's all going to help you get more marks out of your papers. The second variable is then your corrections. So the worst mistake that you can make after you finish a paper is just to leave the paper unmarked. Obviously, most of you will mark it, but the next worst thing is to not correct your mistakes. So correcting your mistakes, as I've said, is worth, in my mind, 3 times more than just doing the marks and getting the marks out of the paper. Because what you're doing when you correct your mistakes is you are learning what you don't know how to do directly. Is the most direct way to improve, because if you have 70% understanding and you have 30% understanding that you aren't entirely clear on, this is where you're losing marks. The aim of your game really from corrections is to compress what you don't know from 30% down to 20%, down to 10%, ultimately 0, because that's when you get into the 90% mark range with what you do in your exams. So correct your mistakes. And the way in which you do this, you have to do it in a way that marks every mark you lost as pain. The human brain remembers pain extraordinarily well. So if, for example, you were to burn your hand on a stove, you would remember in the future, okay, if there's hot stuff and I need to touch it, I should probably use an oven mitt because the last time I touched it, I got burnt pretty bad. So when you're tracking your mistakes, you're saying to your brain that from this academic mistake, I'm in pain and I will not make it again the next time. If you just leave it, it's going to recur, and this is where you get your silly mistakes. Silly mistakes are just uncorrected mistakes that turn up in your exam again. And that's the truth. That's the sad thing about it. It just means you haven't done your corrections well enough. Okay. So my suggestion for this is to use some sort of mistake tracking table. I call it a question solution table, Quizell table, or you can call it a mistake journal, doesn't really matter. You don't have to make it complicated. What I did for my trials, and I don't think I started this until halfway through Mod 6, so if you're starting it now, it's not too late. But if you haven't, 100% recommend starting now. If you're in year 11 and you're thinking about doing this, you're well ahead of the bell curve with what most people are doing. Two parts of the table: questions, solutions. That's it. So in the left column, document any questions you lost marks on. If you lost a half mark, if you have a concept that's unclear, any corrections you got from feedback, you can document them as questions. On the right is the solution, the full mark solution, what you've corrected, what you've added in order to make it full marks. So for example, the bottom one here, this could be seen as a silly mistake in your next exam. So the mistake is that the line, the bond going to the oxygen is not entirely clear. It sort of goes between the O and the H. And so I got a feedback back in the day that you have to indicate, firstly, that the bond doesn't go to the H, and also that you show all bonds in full. So there should also be a bond between the oxygen and the hydrogen, and I lost a mark there. So I've documented it. When I go back through this table and study it, I'll remember again, I messed up because I didn't show all the bonds. I messed up because that bond doesn't go straight to the oxygen. So the next time I'm drawing out an alcohol, I know exactly how to draw the OH and not mess it up. Okay, so super simple, but very, very useful for pushing up your marks from 70 to 90%. So if you're struggling in that range, trying to go from 70 to 90 or somewhere in that area, I would suggest try this out, and chances are it's going to do a world of good. So once you've made your table, and for me, it ended up being about 50, 60, 70 pages by the time of my trial, you can, number one, revise them as flashcards. So because you've got two columns, what you can do is you can cover up your solutions and you can test yourself, where did I mess up in this question, or even just reattempt the question entirely, and then check your answer across on the solutions to see if you got it right. Because that way, if you've gotten it right, it means you've learnt to not make that mistake again. If you've got it wrong, keep the question highlighted in like red, or make it clear that you still don't know this, and you can attempt it again the next time you go through your question solutions. And why that's so effective, again, is because you're revising exactly what you don't know. All of these mistakes that you got from doing questions are basically things you don't know. And if you're revising those mistakes, you're directly revising what you are struggling with. And it's the fastest way to improve. I guarantee it. And again, that is why we emphasize this is worth 3 times as much as just marks you're attaining. You can also use things like Quizlet or Anki to make flashcards. Since these are already in a flashcard format, if you really want to do it that way, you can as well. I think personally to make an Anki deck at this time of year is a little bit late, but I would just keep it simple. 2 rows, cover up, check, 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 and that's how I'd go about it. Be efficient with your study. Don't waste time on things that are just making things look pretty. Okay, any questions on optimizing your corrections as well? Okay, cool. Oh, question. What if there are too many mistakes? So if there's too many mistakes, then it probably means that it's not so much an exam problem. It could be an understanding problem. I think if you're making mistakes to the point where you're under 50% in an exam, it probably means that you don't have sufficient understanding of the content to be taking that exam. And you have to go back to the earlier stage of study where it's more about awareness and understanding with a little bit of exam practice. I think that if you do have a lot of mistakes, it's still worthwhile documenting all those mistakes in a file, but take it as a sign that you probably need to go and review the content again before you attempt further questions, because there's no point just going through, say, 100 marks of questions and you're scoring 40. Number one, it's going to make you feel terrible. And number two, it's not really that efficient because if you're only scoring 40 marks, going back to our equation, if you're only scoring 40 marks, that means this M is not increasing as fast as it should be. And you want to be increasing this quickly as well. Yes, you are making corrections, and that will be helpful. But if you're struggling with the content, fundamentally, it's not going to help just doing exams and getting it all wrong. Does that, let me know if that doesn't make sense, Trisha. I can answer further as well. Hanyu, not related, but how many subjects do you suggest studying for one day in the holiday? Okay, personal preference for everyone. I like to stick to two because I like studying in, say, 3 hour blocks. It just meant I could stay focused on something more difficult in the morning. So I might pick out, for example, a English paper to do in the morning or writing an English essay because I despised English. I don't know if that's the same for most of you. English in the morning and then something easier in the afternoon, say a maths paper. So for me, maths was a lot more straightforward. It made sense. So I could get through that with a lower level of energy, lower level of motivation in the afternoon. That's the way I would structure your day. Start in the morning with something harder as a block, afternoon with something harder, something easier, sorry, as a separate block. And if you want to do three subjects in a day, you can. Um, it's totally like up to you what you do with your blocks. That's just the way I did it. But I think what stays true is you should be doing hard things in the morning and easier things in the afternoon. Okay. How long do you recommend study breaks to last for? Again, personal preference. For me, I would take maybe, and again, this is just the way that I work. I would take an extended block all at once. So 2 to 3 hours, just going through one thing. I take a good break in the middle, hour to hour and a half maybe, to have lunch, to, do something else, go for exercise. And in the afternoon, I'll take another block for, say, 3 hours if I can. So that'd be an example 6 hour day. And then in the evening, because you've done all of your study by, if you start at 9 a.m., you'd be finishing up around 4:30. You've got the rest of the afternoon, the evening to do whatever you want. And that is a break as well. It's your rest. You can go hang out with mates, go have dinner, go, I don't know, play video games, whatever you prefer. But if you've done all your study earlier in the day, it means you have time at the end of the day where you're able to rest without any guilt as well. And do you include mistakes from only past assessments or also past papers done at home? Everything, everything you include. So if it's from past assessments, if it's from, for example, Catalyst homework or Catalyst papers, in your case, Samara, you should be storing those mistakes along the way as well. So if you do past papers at home, if you do HSC exams, in Hong Kong, I don't really care where you do the papers or where the paper is from. If you lost marks, it goes into the table. That's the only rule. If you lost a mark, it goes in the table. It has to be corrected. Does that make sense as well? Any further questions? Okay, cool. All right. So final two variables, the T, time pressure. You have to be doing exams under time pressure these holidays. The trial and the prelim are both time stressful exams because they will have calculations and they will start having longer mark responses for the year 12s. So 5+ mark responses take more than a minute and a half per mark, unfortunately, which is why when you practice, you should be aiming for about a minute and a half per mark as a benchmark. And when you sit down and do a paper, get into the practice of putting on a timer and actually being conscious of how quickly you're traveling through it. Because when you go in the exam, and if you have the wrong mindset saying, okay, if I divide 100 marks, which is a HSC, 100 marks divided by the 180 minutes, it ends up being about, I think, 1.8 minutes per mark. And you think, okay, that's my benchmark, but that's actually not smart because the moment you hit a harder question or you have to bash out a calculation or you have a longer mark, 5+ mark question that takes more than 1.8 minutes per mark, then everything is thrown off. So you need to practice going faster than the true minute per mark allocation so you can carve out time for the harder questions. And that's the same for prelim too. Prelim exams are notoriously time challenging because your first year doing calculations, you've got mod 2 calcs that are, you know, can be challenging at the best of times, and they will take more than 1.8 minutes per mark. I can guarantee it. So aim for a faster timing as a benchmark when you're practicing. Make sure you finish full papers over the course of 3 hours for your trials, or for prelims, 1.5 to 2 hours. At least have done one. I would suggest doing more than one. That way you're comfortable with the timing. At Catalyst, you guys will get a mock trial and a mock prelim as in the weeks I told you about earlier. So you'll get that experience with us and you'll get that all marked with analysis back to you guys so you know. But the bottom line is you need to get comfortable with a need for speed without compromising your accuracy and comprehensiveness in your responses. And that's just going to push up your time tolerance T. And the final variable is so important. It is your sleep. And I cannot stress enough that this is the most common factor that will ruin exams from our students. I've told all the Catalyst students many times, and I'll tell you again, because your sleep is going to decide how you perform on the day. If you have less than 7 hours, all this prep that you've done gets ruined. Say that you had 0 hours of sleep, your score gets reduced to 1, no matter what you did before the day of the exam. But if you have 7 and min H7 means that you take the minimum of 7 or H, so anything more than 7 hours will be treated the same as 7 in my mind. If you have 7 or more hours, you get the maximum of your score. Anything less, you start to diminish it. And it's not good if you are not sleeping well. So you're not sleeping well because of any of these reasons here. There's many more reasons why, but I think this is pretty comprehensive already. And you can group it into psychological reasons, poor study beforehand, bad sleep environment, or just poor routine. So the ways in which that I suggest you fix up your sleep and start getting it right in the holiday. Don't let yourself sleep too late and get into a bad rhythm with your sleeping. You can sleep better by making sure you prepare well, because if you feel good about the prep you're doing, um, you can go to sleep feeling a bit less anxious that you're on top of things. So optimize the marks you complete, the corrections you've done, and your time tolerance. These will all push up your, I guess, level of comfort with where you are. In order to do that, make sure you're getting bang for your buck with your study time. So as I've said, time block, plan out what you need to do from start to finish, write out all the trials you need to do, all the exam papers you need to do for all your subjects on a big piece of paper somewhere, and then time block it out. Doesn't have to be the whole holiday, but at least time block out a few days ahead in advance so you know if you're falling behind at each point through the holiday. And make sure you take effective rest, because if you're not resting, then your study becomes worse in quality and you end up feeling worse about it all as well. Sleep hygiene, so remove blue light, turn off your phone, turn off your screens an hour or two before you go to sleep, and leave your phone outside your room. If you're like me and if you leave your phone in your room, you end up scrolling, just leave it outside. It's much easier. And then on the exam day itself, make sure you have a night before routine and a morning of routine. So for me, my night before routine is that I will do 5 to 10 minutes of like mindfulness or meditation just to get me relaxed and in the zone, helps me fall asleep. And then morning of, I will do a quick 30, 45 minute high yield skim of things that I need to remember on exam day, things I'm just about to be good with. So I might even skim the question solution table. I might skim a quick summary notes that I've made, but something really light on the morning of or just hours before the exam, just so it's front of mind. You have that last little pass over it. Okay. Any questions there? Which school trial papers do you recommend doing? So as I said earlier, the trial papers that I would recommend are from your top selective schools and top private schools. So my favorites are Roos and Sydney Grammar. I think their papers match up to the HSC really accurately, and they have nice applied questions. But pretty much any of the top 10 selective school papers, give or take, and then the top private schools, Barker, Abbottsley, those are good papers too. And then do the independent and CSSA if you can get those as well. Is it too late to join Catalyst? No, it's not. You can join. We close our enrollments for term 3 next week. So that's going to be July 2nd. Our term starts on Wednesday with our first, with our intro session. So if you send us an email or form on our website again, we can get that sorted for you as soon as possible. Rayan, how to balance chemistry study with UCAT study during the holidays? That's actually a really, really fair question. So I'd imagine a fair few of you are going for medicine this July with your UCAT. So it's quite challenging. I will not sugarcoat it to balance your UCAT with all of this. So for the med students or potential med students, UCAT is a priority this holidays, and it's really difficult because you should be spending about an hour or two on UCAT per day to get it up to scratch and be ready for that. So I'm just checking the date. It's June 28th. Yeah, that means you're prepping through most of the holiday. There's no real way around it. I think you have to just ex first thing is to accept that you're going to be working extraordinarily hard these holidays. And the other thing that you need to keep in mind is not to burn yourself out before your trials as well. Because if you're doing your UCAT and you got your trial straight after, it's a big long stretch of like hard work where you're working to your UCAT first, you knock that off, then you've got your trials in a matter of weeks after that. And it's an extended stretch of probably 6 to 8 weeks just working. So you have to make it sustainable. I would say the first thing to make it sustainable is time blocking. That's going to increase your efficiency. It's going to increase how much you can get done and also keep you aware of whether you're ahead or behind of where you need to be. So that starts with going through each of your subjects, making a list of everything you need to get done by the end of the holiday in order to feel that you're happy with what you've done. And same with the UCAT. Write out a list of all the things you need to have done before the day of your UCAT in order to feel happy about it. Because if you've written out that list and you time block it and you realize, hang on, the amount of time I'm gonna have to sink into this is just not reasonable. For example, you list out everything for chem, physics, English, maths, UCAT, you end up with about like 12 hours per day, for example. That may be sustainable for a machine, but if you're anything like me and you start getting to that 12-hour range and you just start losing efficiency, you have to be able to knock off things that are lower priority, that aren't going to give you as much leverage. So the 80-20 rule, I would suggest is the one thing you do if you're in that situation. Pick out the things that will give you 80% value for 20% of the effort. So papers, I would say are 80-20s. I would say memorizing the reaction flowchart is an 80-20 because that's relevant to so many questions. Or going through UCAT mocks, again, super valuable. But things like rewriting your notes, that's not too valuable because at this stage of the year, you're already done with most of the content. You should have made notes already, or you have Catalyst notes. Knock off the things that are low leverage, prioritize the things that will give you the most bang for your buck. I would say that's my advice, and balance as well. Make sure you're doing stuff that allows you to rest. Can you ban 5 or 6 if marks like in the 60s? It is still recoverable. I think we had a student last year who came to us. They'd just moved to Australia earlier in the year, and I think they were struggling with the language barrier. They were around like 50, 60, and they went from their internal mark ended up being like 70, I think 72 because of how poorly they'd done the start of the year. They ended up with an 89 external, which landed them right on 80, I think. 89, 81, 81, because it's the higher of the two. So it is possible if you're sort of on that lower end, but it needs a significant amount of work and the right guidance at the stage of the year because it's a big jump if you're going from marks that are in the 60s, I will say. And then unrelated, do you think using an iPad to do questions negatively affects exam scores because the actual exam uses paper? No, I think it's fine. A lot of our students will use an iPad for importing our files and writing over it. I think it is beneficial to do practice exams on paper, print them out because that will give you the most accurate experience, but nothing wrong with using an iPad. I don't see any problems. And yes, I'll send the slides at the end because the blueprint will be there. Speaking of, here we are. So here's exactly what I want you guys to be doing these holidays. For the prelim students, I'll start with you. For the holidays, you should be finishing Mod 3 content, or Catalyst students will go through. So everything in green is what Catalyst students get from us. You should be finishing your Mod 3 content. Catalyst students are halfway through Mod 3, or 2/5 rather. So we have a little bit left to go. You should be consolidating your Mod 1 to 3 notes and starting to revise over them. In week 3, I want you to attempt your first past prelim paper at the very least. If you can do more through the holidays, go through more, but at least one is my requirement for you to be on track these holidays to doing well. Because you haven't done Mod 4 yet, skip over the Mod 4 questions. We'll give you prelim papers with the Mod 4 questions marked, so you know which ones to skip. And then revise through your question corrections up to this point. Start building out your corrections table. From week 1 to 3, once you go back to term, we'll finish Mod 4 content by week 3. You should then consolidate your Mod 4 notes and be ready to go for Mod 4. And through this period, you're working through past papers. So you're doing one prelim at least in week 1 to 2, if you can fit in 2, and start to attempt Mod 4 questions as you see the content in our teaching. And week 3, run your first full-scale prelim exam, attempting all questions on your own first. So you should have learned the Mod 4 content. Yes, it'll be challenging to do questions on it, but give it a go. And then in week 4, that'll be the Catalyst mock prelim exam, the official one. So we write it based on the trends we see in prelim papers from 2022 to 2024. We pick out the questions we think that represent what's being assessed across the state best, and we write it for you. We review that in week 5. So then by this point, week 5 of the term, you would have done 1, 2, 3, 4 papers minimum. That's to be on track. And then from this point, do a very quick review of a content, go through the syllabus dot points, make sure you've stopped lighted, you know what you're missing, and stay on a past paper schedule. Fit in 1 per week until the day of your prelim. So if you have an exam in week 6, you can fit in 1 more in week 5. You maybe fit in an extra one in week 4 if you're feeling good. But the point is you should have at least 4 papers done. And if you can get more done than that, even better. So that's the prelim schedule. Any questions there from the prelim students? Okay, cool. And the trial blueprint. So I've broken this a bit more granular because you guys have more to get through. The first week of these holidays, we'll finish the first third of Mod 8 content. So IQ1 Part 1. I want you to consolidate your Mod 5 to 6 notes, go through the syllabus, stoplight, figure out where you're weak and revise those weak points. Attempt your first HSC paper in full. I know it sounds crazy because you haven't done Mod 8 yet, but you need to see what a HSC paper looks like soon. And no better time than this first week of the holiday. You can skip the Mod 8 questions, that's fine. Just read over their solutions. If you've already done Mod 8, then you can do it, but otherwise don't worry about it. And I cannot stress, do not worry about saving papers because there's so many out there now. Should you do it timed or untimed? Depends on your comfort. I think it'd be good to put yourself through it if you're feeling up to it already, but it might be a bit challenging because you haven't done the Mod 8 questions yet. I would say do it being conscious of time. So maybe keep a timer, seeing how long you go for, and then see if you're on track because you'd have to do maybe 70, 75 marks and leave out a few questions. I wouldn't do it over 3 hours because it won't make sense if you're skipping Mod 8 questions. Should you do papers open book to start? If you're not ready to sit a closed book paper, yes, go for it. But through these holidays, you should be at a point where you're able to sit these papers closed book. So start trying the questions closed book, and then when you need help, go back and you can read your notes to construct an answer that makes sense if you're struggling with a particular question. Would you sit a whole paper at once or say half, then review the mistakes? Starting off early, it's fine to do half. So for example, this paper here, if you're not too confident just yet, you can sit half at first, as Amelia suggesting, and then the second half a little bit later. But I would say at some point in these holidays, you need to have sat a whole paper at once. Doesn't have to be your first one. In fact, probably shouldn't be your first one. Okay. Second week, finish the second third of Mod 8 content. So we'll teach you IQ1 Part 2. Spend the time to consolidate the rest of your Mod 6 notes and then any Mod 7 notes that you have, and go over and stop like the syllabus again. Attempt your second past HSC paper in this week. Again, you can skip Mod 8 questions, but because you've covered around about 2/3 of the Mod 8 content, you can start doing Mod 8 questions now. And I would make a conscious effort to start on the Mod 8 this week. Again, revise your question corrections, go through your question solution table. Week 3 of holidays, finish Mod 8. We'll finish Mod 8 doing the final third, IQ2 and IQ3. So IQ3 is a really small one. It's basically just Mod 5. It's really not that bad. So what we do is we'll teach you IQ2 in your main class, and we'll run IQ3 as a workshop to push it ahead and make sure it's all done in the holiday. A lot of schools don't even include IQ3, so if you know it's not in your trial, don't even bother learning it this time. You can skip this and delay it till after your trial. But this week, because you've done all the Mod 8 content, consolidate Mod 8 and fully attempt a past HSC paper. A third one. I would recommend 2020. 2020 was a great paper because it's all very intuitive and it needs you to apply a lot of concepts from across the modules. I'll recommend this one. You can also do 21 or 22 to get a taster of a harder paper if you're at that level of confidence. But I'll do 2020 as a moderately difficult paper. And again, continue revising your question corrections. Any questions for the holidays, Year 12s? Does this make sense? Or is this too ambitious? Why was 2020 harder? The questions were more applied compared to 2019, 23, and 24. I would say 2024 was a nice paper as well, quite applied, but it was all reasonably doable up until the very last question. The last question was very difficult. Okay, any other questions? Cool. And then once you start term, keep it simple. Week 1 to 2 is the Catalyst mock trial. So it's based on 2023 and 2024 trials. Again, we do our analysis, we look through all the papers and we pick out what we think is going to come up in your exams. And we do find, just as we do for the prelims, that students come back and say, oh, that question in the mock trial was literally in my exam, or that question in the mock trial pretty much reworded was in my exam. And that's because of all the analysis that our student performance team does behind the scenes, trying to dig out what we think will be in your exams. It's not a coincidence. Week 3 to 5 is where we do exam skills and refinement. So we talk through all the things that will optimize your exam performance in terms of graphing, in terms of actually writing out quality responses for longer responses. And we'll give you more questions to do that will hone in closer to exam time, the skills that you need in order to push into 80s, 90s with your trial and prelim marks. I would recommend that you try work through a trial per week, similar to what I said for the prelim students, one trial per week. I know it's 3 hours and then you probably just spend an hour and a half correcting it, but the point is that this whole period of preparation is going to be intense. And in order to be at the top, you have to be working like a student who's at the top. So one trial per week is what I recommend, or a HSC paper. So start to weave in your own school's past trials, the remaining HSC papers that you haven't done, and then you can also maybe have a go at a top schools paper as well if you've got some free time as well. But I can't imagine that you'd be doing too much more than one trial a week. If you can do 2 a week closer to your exam date, great. But the expectation is probably just one. And at this final period right before you sit your trial, what I would say that you should do is there again should be a full rapid review over your content where you're covering mod 5, 6, 7, 8 all front to back so that you can pick out the things that you're not sure about, stop light the syllabus again, and make sure the things that were red before are now at least orange or preferably green in your mind matrix. So any final questions around the blueprint that I've laid out? Anything unclear? I know it's a little bit ambitious, but the point is that the schedule should push you. Okay. How many papers should be done if my trial is in week 4? Also, what should we be doing in the time where we have trials for other subjects? Okay, so if your trial's week 4, you would have done paper 1, paper 2, paper 3. If you're a Catalyst student, you've done our paper 2. So paper 4 here. If you do a paper per week on top of that, you have 4 weeks. So it'll be up to 8 papers if you stay on this schedule, which is a great place to be in your week 4 trial. Um, so then what should we be doing? And then yes, the second part of the question is when you have trials for other subjects, you obviously have to balance it. So the time right before you take a particular trial is going to be most critical for that trial. It's worth like double, say. So if you have, for example, maths in week 3, you should be spending more time on maths, doubling down on it in the days before maths, and you can cut down on chem right before it, or cut down on everything else. Same way for chem, right before chem, you should be doubling down on chem. You've done a lot of like prep before it, but in that critical period, the 5, 6, 7 days before chem, you might want to double your load. That's where you do a second pass paper in that week, or a third even, if you can. So balance it by you making use of the critical periods right before trials to get extra bang for your time. Is it better to do HSC papers or trials? It is better to do HSC papers. There's no two ways about it. If you're going to your trial and you've seen all 6 HSC papers, you know every question that they've asked in the HSC before, guess where your teachers are writing their papers off? Is the HSCs. So I would prioritize HSC for that reason. Then your school's trials, because ultimately your teachers are writing the exam for you, and then other schools' trials. And the Catalyst trial is the aggregation of all those other school trials. So plus HSC as well, actually, I should say. So I would say that order, Yitharth. What should you do if you're starting mod 5 from scratch? Forgot most of it. Okay. If you're starting mod 5 from scratch, I'd imagine you've at least gone through it before. The first thing that you can do is watch our rapid reviews on YouTube. They go for about 2 hours each and they go through the whole module front to back. And it's a great way to revise it if you've forgotten everything and pick out what you don't know. Because once you've watched that 2 hours, you can say, these specific dot points, which you can see on the screen, are the ones that I don't know. And you can go back and redress those, do questions on those. And for Catalyst students, you can then go back and work through our compendium of questions to test each dot point. So I would say that. Go through the content again first, and then revise the specific things you're struggling with. They'll be recording up. Yes, they will. After reviewing Catalyst notes, how can I gain deeper understanding rather than memorizing? Is watching YouTube helpful? I would say once you've been through the content, there's not much point going through the YouTube again because that's just going to be the content same again. The only way is just going through questions. And it's going to be a matter of picking out past prelim papers, doing them, as I've been saying, seeing the questions that are challenging for you specifically, keeping them in a document so you know what is difficult and addressing those problems in your study. So questions is my recommendation because when you're becoming exam ready, as we've seen in our equation today, doesn't matter how much content you review, all that matters for becoming exam ready is the marks you do or your marks you get from past questions and the marks that you corrected from that study as well. Those are the only 2 things that are going to push up your exam readiness, particularly for difficult questions. If my chem trial is on August 12th, what does that line up with the Catalyst week timeline? I'll need a calendar. 1 second. Let me check. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that would be week 4 of term. If it's August 12th, which means that you are in week 7 of the catalyst timeline. So you would have done all of Mod 8, the mock trial, and you would have had 1 week of exam refinement at least. And then we can push the last 2 weeks earlier if you'd like those as well. You have a major work due within trial block. Should I aim to complete it before? Yes. Don't leave major works incomplete at the time of trial exams. That's probably the worst thing you could do. I would try front load that work early in the holiday, get as much of it done. That way, when you're getting close to exam times, you're making use of that critical study time to actually revise for your exams. What is your experience with the Catholic school system's chem trials? I would say that they're relatively good papers. They're relatively well balanced. Sometimes they draw on things that are quite peripheral, same as independent. They do ask some questions that can be quite left of field. So the only way to get familiar with those harder questions that they sometimes do like to ask is having seen other Catholic papers and just know what they tend to ask around or the styles of questions they tend to ask. Sometimes very specific things that they ask on, which is frustrating to prepare for, but that's my only advice for those trials specifically. And then after doing 7 to 8 full trials, should we just skim other trial papers and pick hard questions, not waste time? Yeah, for sure. And this applies to trials you start doing later on as well. If you get asked like a equilibrium question where you are being asked to explain a pressure change for like the 15th time, it's probably not worth your time getting close to exams to do it again. Start picking out the harder questions to not waste your time. I think that's very, very valid suggestion, but of course, keep it under time conditions where you're doing minute and a half a mark, condition yourself to working efficiently without losing your accuracy, and that would be a very smart thing to do. A few direct questions. Will we finish Mod 8 by 21st of July? Chemistry, Year 12 students. Also just wondering if you have the CSA or NEET papers my private school using. Yeah, we have papers for Catalyst students. We'll send them out for our students specifically in the Slack. And Mod 8 by 21st of July. Um, Let me just check the dates as well. So yeah, we'd finish it bang on right before 21st. So the last class finishes Mod 8 on July 20th, and the earliest class finishes July 17th. And question from Chris as well. I'll copy this into the main chat because it's a long one, just so everyone doesn't get lost. Should we be revising content in between exam? What is the most effective way to do this? Question bank, will this be reinforced through more practice questions? Just referring to gaining practice for those long extended response questions and if we should practice them separately. Yeah, okay. So do you mean like in between trials, Chris? Just to clarify, you can unmute just quickly.
Yeah.
Okay. So in between trials, I don't think you really change your study too drastically. Stick to the same strategy you're using the whole way along. So it's as you suggest, questions with a question bank with correcting your mistakes and making sure that's your mainstay for optimizing your exam readiness. When you say for long extended responses, should we practice them separately? I think that for the long response questions, the only difference in the way you revise is that you have to spend a bit more time potentially memorizing things. If it's like polymers, for example, you might have to do a bit more active recall to get that all into your brain. So polymers, soaps, the esterification process, that kind of stuff, you will need to be a bit more conscious with spacing your repetition and doing it a few more times. But ultimately, if you're rewriting the response for those long responses, that's going to get you that repetition anyway. And checking the answers for what you missed or getting our team to mark it for you, that's what's going to get you better marks on those longer responses. And do you keep studying for a subject the night before you have another subject? Or is it full focus on that subject? Again, personal preference entirely, and it depends on your schedule. If it was, for example, bio and then chem the next day, maybe I would consider doing chem the same night as bio, just a little bit, but I would do it early. I would do chem first for like an hour or two, and then everything else beyond that is bio until you decide to call it a day. If you have bio, say on Friday, and then you have chem on Monday, that's a different situation because you can just go all out and sprint for bio on Friday. Then you've got the weekend to sprint for chem. So I would not touch my bio time with chem time if that was the case. Hopefully that makes sense as well. Okay, I'm aware that we are a little bit over time. So if you do have to head off, thank you very much for coming along. Final thing is that our term does start next week. We've got a big, big portion of your year left, up to 70%, depending on how your school's weighted things. So that does mean that if you are going to learn from the best and you're going to use the best resources at Catalyst, that you're getting probably the best bang for your buck at this stage of the year. So the Mod 3 and 4 or the Mod 8 programs, our intensives start from next week. Enrollments close July 2nd. You can either give us an email at this email address, or you can send a form in through our website. Either way, happy to have a chat just to see if it's right for you. And that's pretty much it. Any final questions, I'm happy to stay behind for, but otherwise, if you have to head, thank you very much for coming along. Hopefully this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one, or see you back on Instagram, wherever you came from.